The SEC lawsuit, both Ripple and the SEC have filed our motions for summary judgment. So the decision now rests with the judge to make her decision. We're optimistic about having a positive resolution there sometime this year.
Can you give us any further timeline? Because it seems the action in the XRP token seems to assume something's around the corner.
Unfortunately, we don't know. It's really just with the judge. It's up to her.
And still hopeful that it will be on the side of Ripple at this point?
Very hopeful, yes.
What are the implications if it doesn't?
The implications if the decision
goes the way of the SEC.
We think that that's very unlikely, considering, by our view, both the facts and the law are on our side. In terms of broader picture, what's happening in the U.S. on the regulatory front, we're seeing action through enforcement versus setting clear rules and regulation, which is what all of us in the industry really desire.
So on that regulatory front as well, we are here in France, and France is really trying to push itself to become a key crypto hub, not just here in Europe, but globally as well. So as you look at what's happening in Europe with countries like France and Switzerland trying to create sort of crypto-friendly environments versus the US and the SEC, which is very heavy on the enforcement side at the moment, as a business, is the US falling behind?
We think so. And so you raise a great point. Europe is really emerging as
A lot of people believe that, and especially the other executives at Ripple believes that if the U.S. Continues to not put forth regulation and policy, they are going to fall behind. And the world is not waiting for them. Technology is not waiting for them. So the U.S. and its lawmakers needs to come up with a solution.
as a leader in terms of setting really clear regulations and rules that allow crypto companies and also traditional finance to embrace crypto. MiCA, the set of rules set forth by 27 countries who've come together to set a common framework, which is remarkable when, you know, the U.S. has one government and they can't get their act together.
And what does that mean ultimately then for Ripple's business expansion? Are you looking at sort of hiring in Europe here? Are you looking at expanding offices here in Europe as a result?
We are, yes. So we have our hub in London, but we have 9 offices around the world, and we're growing our team primarily outside the U.S., which is where our business is. Last quarter, about 75% of our flagship product, the payment network, the flows were outside the U.S.
And what can you tell us then about that, some of that expansion here in Europe? The headcount specifically in certain countries or sort of product expansion?
Both, absolutely. So we're continuing to hire even through this crypto winter where we're seeing a lot of companies contract, because we've had a focus for, you know, since the beginning of Ripple 10 years ago, we've really been focused on solving real world problems and bringing utility to crypto. We've had we're in a good position to continue to grow the team. So we're hiring through our London office and also expanding our payment network throughout Europe.
Monica, what can we read into the big rally we have seen in Bitcoin this year and sort of the broader crypto markets? Is this signaling optimism that this crypto winter is coming to an end? Are we at the early signs of a new bull run here?
It's hard to say when the winter will thaw exactly.
Yeah, I agree with her. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. Any world event can cause crypto, stock market to go up or down, right? So it's really hard to predict where the next bull run and the next bear market is going to be. She gives a great answer here.
I think what we're seeing is that crypto and Bitcoin, the industry in general, is here to stay, even in the wake of recent events with the U.S. banks.
And in terms of those collapses of U.S. banks, what kind of fallout have you seen so far?
The utility crypto, those that are, will provide value to human, those cryptos will go forward. But all these crap coins, they're not really going to go down. Most of them are scams anyways.
These are 2 key lenders to the industry, and there are questions about whether there are other banks around the world that can pick up that slack. whether this is going to sort of cause even further damage in terms of funding to startups and the broader crypto ecosystem. What are the sort of potential implications here?
I think we've seen some strong resilience in the crypto markets, considering those three banks, Silvergate, Signature, and Silicon Valley Bank, were three of the most crypto-friendly banks in the U.S. So we saw crypto effectively become unbanked in the U.S. overnight, shutting off those U.S. dollar on-ramps. But in pretty quick order, we've seen that the industry not only persist but kind of revive itself. And now we're seeing new banks in the U.S. kind of come into the fray. The bigger question, though, is U.S. regulators' outlook. Some in the industry have called this choke point 2.0, where the U.S. government is taking action to sort of snuff out crypto, which is impossible. This is technology that, the genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. It's going to exist, so it's a question of which countries are going to embrace it and set forth rules that allow the industry to thrive, and I think that you're going to see the innovation leave the U.S.
And I agree with her again on another point, because it really depends on which country embraces this new technology. And of course, as the other CEOs, one of the founders said that, the U.S. is going to be left behind if they don't do anything about that. And as you're saying, they're hiring outside the U.S. and they're going to survive regardless if the United States make up their minds on regulations or not.
And even though a lot of companies there will start talking about decentralization and crypto as an alternative to traditional finance, it's still very clear that a lot of these companies rely heavily on the traditional banking system.
That's true. That there's I think an interlacing, and our vision at Ripple and what we've always talked about is that the way that blockchain and crypto can really really modernize financial systems is by plugging into and working with traditional finance, not overturning it or disrupting it.
And in terms of
good point there.
The banking, there's a big lot of turmoil here in the banking sector at the moment. You work with financial institutions. Given that turmoil we are seeing, are they sort of turning away from your product at this point, given trying to sort of put out the fires elsewhere? Is this a bit of a pause in the industry in terms of adoption of your products?
We're not seeing that. We're continuing to grow, so we're coming to a close on our Q1, but even still, we're continuing to see growth and new customer interest.
Bringing the case against Ripple was not really just a case about Ripple or about XRP. It's really about the industry and how the SEC is kind of playing offense and attacking the whole industry. 2.5 years ago when this started, I'm not sure everyone fully digested that, and now that is widely understood. This is going to be pivotal for the whole industry, because if the SEC is able to prevail, I think there's a lot of other cases, and some of them just in the last 4 weeks, I think they brought 5 additional enforcement cases. The macro headline for me is this is not a healthy way to regulate an industry. Your regulation through enforcement, as opposed to where we're seeing in other countries where they're doing the work, right? They're codifying, they're creating a framework that allows an industry to grow while protecting consumers. And I think that's really what the U.S. is lagging. And to some degree why I'm here in Washington is to continue to try to evangelize and educate. Here's how these technologies can really benefit consumers, benefit industry.
Is what I'm hearing from you essentially, if the U.S. doesn't get its act together and move more quickly, all of this is going offshore. It's just going elsewhere.
Well, it already is. I mean, the sad reality is that the U.S. really is already behind. This.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, right? Seeing how big of a superpower we are, and then we lead in a lot of areas, and for us to fall back on crypto, that would be damaging to the city. I'm sorry, to the U.S., but also to other companies as well.
This is not behind countries that we haven't necessarily heard of. This is behind Australia and behind the UK, Japan, Singapore, Switzerland. There's a lot of countries that have taken the time and thoughtfulness to create that clear rules of the road. By contrast, when I first got involved in the tech industry in the late 90s, some were saying the internet should be banned. They were saying, like, here's how the internet is being used for illicit purposes. But the U.S. government said, no, we're going to create a framework. And that allowed entrepreneurs, that allowed investors to come in and look at the benefits to the United States on a geopolitical basis.
He actually makes a great point there. And then we could do the same thing with crypto, but these knuckleheads at the government that just can't get their act together,
To have the Amazons and Googles based and headquartered in the United States. We're at, I think, severe risk of having that not happen in this next evolution of technology around blockchain and crypto. it has already started moving outside the United States. And also, the consumers are suffering because of that, because you don't have the same protections that the U.S. regulatory frameworks can provide.
What would a good framework look like, in your view?
Well, look, I think what you're seeing right now is the Securities Exchange Commission. You know, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And not everything here is a nail. And I think it has to, any framework.
He makes a good point. I mean, you have to really do your due diligence and do your research to see which companies are scamming others and which companies are there for the good of the people, for the good of the world. You know, as he said that if you're a hammer, everything is a nail. Everything is not a nail, right? So everyone does not have the same purpose out there. Some are to scam, and then some are legitimate good business people and trying to help and do good in the world.
Framework has to start with clear protections for consumers, but then to thoughtfully understand that these aren't always going to be securities. Some of them are used as currencies. That is, having an efficient process to trade, exchange, move those things would be much harder in a world if they were regulated as securities.